Before any word is released into the air, there is an invisible moment, a small space between the rising breath and the falling voice. It is there, in this almost imperceptible silence, that conflicts really arise, or if dissolve. Maybe you've already felt this. You enter an argument determined to defend yourself, to explain, to win. But, before he even spoke, something in the environment had already hardened. The air feels heavier, the other's gaze closes, and suddenly it's not two people talking anymore, it's two forces clashing. What few realize is that at this moment, it is not words that create opposition, it is the energy that precedes them. Just as two winds that are in opposite directions generate turbulence, two rigid intentions never produce understanding. They just raise dust. And when the dust rises, no one sees clearly. Nature shows us another way. Observe the water in front of an obstacle. She doesn't throw herself at the rock in anger. She doesn't try to prove. She's stronger. It just remains and passes. There is something that can be said before any discussion, but not with your mouth, not with arguments, not with long explanations or sharp defenses. It's an internal gesture, a silent alignment, an invisible choice that the other feels, even without understanding why. When this gesture happens, something curious appears. The other person's energy finds no place to rely on to fight. There is no opposition. There is no shock. There is space. And in space, even anger gets tired. This video is an invitation to return to this forgotten point, the point before the speech, the place where the conflict has not yet taken shape, where the invisible decides the direction of the visible. If you feel like there is something beyond words guiding your encounters, if you have already noticed that some arguments are resolved without winning, so remain here, breathe, listen, because what will be revealed is not a technique to convince others, but a way to cease opposition before it even arises. And it all starts in silence. When an argument starts, most people believe that the problem lies in the conversation content, believe it's the different opinions, the poorly chosen words, or the opposing arguments that create the conflict. But actually, that's just the surface. What really happens is something deeper, more subtle, and almost always invisible. Before any sentence is said, the body has already taken position. The shoulders stiffen, the breathing becomes short, the chest closes. It's like the inside is getting ready for a battle. At that moment, the mind does not seek understanding. She seeks protection. And all protection creates resistance. Two people who enter into an argument from this state are not trying to get along. Listen, they are trying to assert themselves. They are trying not to give in. They're trying not to lose space. And when two rigid internal camps meet, opposition is inevitable. No matter how calm the words are, the energy is already in confrontation. This is why many arguments escalate quickly. Not because someone said something serious, but because both arrived armed inside. Like fogged-up mirrors, one reflects the tension of the other. One defensive tone awakens another. A closed look finds another even harder. And in a few seconds, what could be a dialogue turns into a clash. Nature doesn't work like that. A river does not argue with the bank that limits it. He doesn't try to cross it by force. It simply recognizes the contour and adjusts. And when adjust, move on. There is no waste of energy. There is no unnecessary friction. Human beings, however, have learned to confuse rigidity with strength. You learned that giving in is to lose, that to soften is to weaken, that to silence is to be dominated, and carries these beliefs into every difficult conversation. The result is predictable: tension, wear, and tear remoteness. When someone opposes you in an argument, most of the time they don't is reacting to what you said. It is reacting to the state it has found. Are you reacting to hardness, haste, the intention to win? Even if all this is not conscious, the body understands. Energy responds. Therefore, trying to convince someone of their rigidity is like pushing a door that is already closed, being pushed from the other side. The more force is applied, the more resistance arises. And the more resistance arises, the further away any possibility of harmony becomes. Understanding this changes everything, because it reveals that the true point of transformation is not in the right argument, nor in the perfect sentence, nor in the most intelligent answer. It's an inner state with which you enter the conversation. It's in what happens inside you before any words existed, and that's exactly where the path begins to open up. There is a moment before the speech that almost no one notices, an instant when there was no answer, but where everything has already been decided. At this point, before the voice manifests, something in you has already chosen the tone, the direction, and the consequence of the conversation. It is the word that is born before the word. It is not sonorous. It cannot be heard, but it is felt. It is the silent intention with which you position yourself in front of the other, and most of the time, it is this intention that determines whether there will be opposition or openness. When someone enters an argument, carrying the need to impose themselves even if you speak calmly, the body delivers the truth. The gaze becomes too fixed. The breath loses depth. There is a subtle tension on his face. The other notices this immediately, even if I can't explain how. And when it notices, it responds on the same frequency. But there is another possible state, a state in which you enter the conversation without urgency to win, without the rush to convince, without the fear of losing space. In this state, speech comes from an emptier place. Not empty in the sense of absence, but of availability. An internal space where there is no excessive ego, no anticipatory defense. At this point, something different happens. The words come out simpler. The tone is lower. The pace slows down. And the other, instead of preparing for the attack, begins to relax. Not because I agree with you, but because I don't feel threatened. It's like entering a quiet environment after a lot of noise. The body recognizes it. A mind slows down. The energy adjusts. Before any discussion, there is an invisible gesture that can be made. It's not a sentence memorized, not even a forced positive thought. It is an inner choice of softness, one real willingness to listen, even if there is no agreement. A deep acceptance of that you don't need to dominate the situation to be safe. This gesture works as an internal purification. It clears the intention before it becomes turned into words. And when the intention is clean, the speech does not carry poison, nor weight, nor hidden challenge. Many ancient traditions knew this. They knew that the conflict cannot be resolved in confrontation direct, but in the preparation of the spirit. Did you know that when the inside is in order, the exterior reorganizes itself naturally? If this idea starts to make sense to you, it's no coincidence. It's because something inside already recognized this path. Perhaps you have already experienced moments when a difficult situation was resolved effortlessly, simply because you were in another state, more present, more open, less reactive. This is the word that is born before the word. And when it is chosen consciously, the other's energy finds a different field, a field where there is no opposition to sustain the conflict. And it is from this field that true harmony begins to manifest itself. Most conflicts last because we learn to argue as if everything conversation was a dispute. From an early age, we were taught that you have to be right, sustain a point of view, and defend our position until the end. In this model, giving in means losing, and losing means weakening. But this logic, although common, is deeply exhausting. When someone enters an argument with the intention of winning, the other feels it. Even although there is no overt aggression, there is a subtle pressure in the air. The conversation stops being an encounter, and it becomes a force field. Each sentence is a strategic move. Every silence is interpreted as an advantage or threat. In this scenario, harmony makes it impossible, because the very objective of the conversation is already conflicting. Harmony is not born from the triumph of one side over the other. It arises when the need of winning disappears. When this happens, something loosens up inside. The body relaxes. A mind stops calculating. The conversation loses the weight of competition and gains lightness. In nature, there is no idea of victory. A river does not overcome the stone it finds in its path. He simply bypasses it. There is no resentment, no insistence. There is only continuity. And paradoxically, it is exactly this absence of confrontation that allows the river to move forward without fragmenting. In human relationships, the principle is the same. When you let go of the need to imposing your point is not canceling yourself out. It is interrupting the cycle of opposition. It is removing the fuel that keeps the conflict active. Without resistance, the voltage does, not sustains for a long time. Many people believe that if they don't take a firm stance, they will be dominated. But firmness is not rigidity. True steadfastness comes from a stable center, not a constant defense. When you are centered, you don't need to prove anything. Your presence communicates security effortlessly. By ceasing internal opposition, you create a space where the other person can let their guard down. No because you won, but because there is nothing left to fight against. Instead of two forces colliding, a neutral field emerges, where words can finally be heard, no distortion. This does not mean agreeing with everything, nor accepting disrespect. It means choosing not to turn every disagreement into a battle. It means recognizing that the peace of a meeting is worth more than the momentary victory of one argument. When this choice is made, the conversation changes in quality. The tone adjusts. The pauses make it more natural. Silence stops being uncomfortable and becomes part of the dialogue. And solutions often appear effortlessly, not because someone else was more convincing, but because the conflict has lost its basis. Harmony, in the end, is not about convincing the other. It is removing from yourself the need to oppose. And when this happens, the entire field reorganizes itself. There is a simple, silent, and profoundly transformative gesture that can be done before any discussion. It requires no special words, no external preparation. It does not depend on the other's behavior. This gesture takes place entirely within you, and that's precisely why it works. Before speaking, before responding, before even formulating an argument, there is a moment where you can turn inward and recognize something essential. You are not in danger. Most arguments arise from an unconscious feeling of threat of not being understood, losing space, being devalued. When this feeling governs the inside, the body reacts as if it needs to fight or flee. The internal gesture consists of interrupting this impulse. It is a conscious pause in which you let go of the need to protect yourself, not because the other is right, but because you decide not to enter the defense field. At this time, you allow your body to relax. Let your breath go down a little deeper. Let your face soften. This gesture is not passivity. It's presence. It's choosing to remain whole without getting up barriers. When this happens, something very specific changes in the field of conversation. An energy that would come out in the form of resistance turns into space, and space is disarming. When the other speaks from tension and encounters rigidity, the tension grows. But when finds space, it begins to dissolve. It's like screaming in an open valley instead of in a wall. The sound does not return with the same strength. It disperses. Internally, this gesture can be expressed as a clear disposition. I don't need win. I don't need to convince. I don't need to defend myself now. Not like affirmations repeated mechanically, but as a felt truth. When this truth is real, the body believes. And when the body believes, the energy changes. It is at this point that something curious happens. The other starts to tone it down without realizing it. Sentences become less sharp. The posture adjusts. Not because you asked, but because there is no longer any opposition sustaining the confrontation. This internal gesture also prevents you from being swept away by the other person's emotions. Instead, from reacting automatically, you start responding from a calmer center. This creates a clear difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate and impulsive. Reply born from space. The more you practice this gesture, the more natural it becomes. It stops being an effort conscious and becomes an accessible state. And, over time, many discussions, they simply stop happening because the energy that would feed them no longer finds fertile ground. What disarms the other is not submission, nor forced silence. It is the absence of resistance internal. When you offer no opposition, the energy of conflict finds no place to rest. She passes, and when it passes, it takes with it the need to fight. This is the invisible gesture that transforms difficult encounters. He doesn't change the other directly. It changes the field. And when the field changes, everything that happens within it changes too. There is a silent law that governs all human encounters. People do not, they react only to what we say, but to the field we carry. Even without realizing it, Each of us enters a conversation surrounded by an inner state. This state precedes words and shapes the other's response. When you arrive tense, rushed, or defensive, the environment adjusts accordingly. The other feels that something needs to be faced. But when you arrive centered, available, and without internal opposition, the field transforms. Not because you did something visible, but because something stopped being emitted. It is common to believe that to change a difficult situation, you need to change someone else. Convince him, correct him, or make him see. But this almost never works lasting. What really changes the course of an interaction is changing its own state. When you change, the field changes. And when the field changes, the behavior of the another tends to reorganize itself. This phenomenon can be clearly observed in nature. A churning lake reflects distorted images. Even if the sky is clear, the moving water does not allow you to see clearly. But when the lake calms down, the reflection becomes clear by itself. Heaven doesn't need it to change, just the water. In relationships, the principle is the same. Often the other person is not being difficult because conscious intention, but because it met resistance. By removing this resistance, you offers a calmer countryside. And in this field, the tension loses strength. That doesn't mean that all conflicts will disappear immediately, but it means that they won't scale the same way. It means you stop being dragged by the state other's emotions. Instead of reacting to chaos, you become a point of stability inside it. Over time, this way of being creates a noticeable difference. People start to communicate with you in a more direct, less aggressive way. Not because you demanded it respect, but because his presence does not provoke defense. It invites clarity. This internal alignment also has an important effect. You start to leave the conversations with less wear and tear. Even when there is disagreement, there is no exhaustion. Why you didn't fight anything? You remained in one piece. Changing the field is not a grandiose act. It's a return to the center. A fine adjustment of intention. A silent reminder that you don't need to oppose to exist. When you choose this path, something becomes clear. True influence. It is not born from confrontation, but from inner harmony. And this harmony, when present, is naturally spreads to everything around. In the end, every discussion is a meeting between inner worlds. Two universes come together approaching, each one carrying their stories, fears, expectations, and wounds. What defines the outcome of this meeting is not who speaks best, nor who is right, but the state from which each person presents themselves. When you enter into a conversation without internal opposition, something essential changes. You stop fighting to exist. Stop proving your worth. Stop fighting for space. And in this silent gesture find something deeper. Stability. A stability that does not depend on the other person's reaction. That's what softness teaches. She does not face harshness directly. She crosses it. She is not imposed. It remains. And when it remains, it transforms. Many people spend their entire lives believing that they need to toughen up to avoid being wounds, that they need to build walls to not be crossed. But what? Does the experience shows time and again the opposite? The stiffer the interior, the more shocks arise. The smoother the state, the less resistance it encounters. Saying something before arguing is not repeating a specific phrase. It is assuming a state. It is enter into silence before speaking. It's remembering deep in your chest that you don't have to win to be at peace. When this reminder is true, it manifests in the body, in the tone, in the rhythm, and even in the look. And the other feels it. Always feel. Not every conversation will end in agreement. Not all conflict will disappear. But when you change the field, opposition is no longer automatic. There is more space, more listen, more humanity, and above all, less wear and tear. This path is not about controlling people or manipulating situations. It's about alignment, about living in harmony with the invisible that permeates every encounter. When you aligns, the world around responds differently, not out of obligation, but because resonance. If this way of seeing discussions touches something in you, maybe it's a sign of that there is already, within you, a silent wisdom waiting to be remembered. One wisdom that does not shout, does not dispute, does not impose, guide only. If you want to continue walking through this space of silence, presence, and inner harmony, sign up and follow us. There are many invisible encounters yet to be understood. And who knows, What if what we call conflict is just an invitation to listen more? Deeply the invisible whisper that has accompanied us since the beginning.